You're listening to the Living Mandala podcast. My name is Ara. And today we are inaugurating a new podcast series. It's all about the Enneagram. And I am here with Joanna Douglas. She is the proprietrix of Ensight. What do you call it? Just Ensight Coaching? Yeah, Ensight Coaching. And Joanna and I know each other from a previous day job. So it's really cool to reconnect in this way. We both worked for many years at a large public broadcasting station. How's that for cloaked language? Which we both love, still a donor. But, it's time to move on. And when you know, you know. And I think as we'll learn through this Enneagram study that, sometimes certain types know when they know and need to move on. And so both of us, for our own individual reasons, have moved on, but we've remained in contact because of this really interesting course of study and new line of work that Joanna is doing. So welcome, Joanna.
Wonderful to be here, Ara.
Thank you. You know me by my birth name, Sarah Jane, which I, of course, was on television and radio with for many, many years. But in 2016, I rebirthed with this new moniker, Ara. And so it is the name that I use for my creative projects. It's kind of like a pen name, like I think Beyonce has Sasha Fierce. So yep. Sarah Jane has Ara, whatever.
That's right.
That's what we're doing here. So anyway, it's wonderful to be here. So tell us a little bit about yourself and maybe a little bit about Ensight Coaching.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to be here. Thank you for the opportunity. So I'm Joanna Douglas, and I am a thrice-time entrepreneur, and at the moment, third time's a charm. I have been answering a soul calling to help people to be happier and healthier at work, specifically focusing on women most of the time, and using the Enneagram as a way for, as a model for personal growth and a way to be the best version of themselves. So I have gone out on my own and in the process of sharing the good word about the Enneagram, and that's what I'm up to these days.
Awesome. Well, I know that you and I have had several conversations. I was one of your early in your trajectory prototype coaching students. And I know I derived a ton of benefit from learning more about myself through the lens of the Enneagram. So I'm very grateful for our experience together. And it really is what prompted the idea for this podcast series. Living Mandala Consulting is, the name of my business. And, one of the things that I do, among many things, but one of the things that I do is really help folks explore what I call their upper mandala and their lower mandala. So your upper mandala is, going to be your astrological profile, your natal chart, things like this. But your lower mandala shows up in your house and your home. And so, the first podcast series was all about how the chakras, where to find the chakras of the house, how they reflect back to yourself in, this dialogue that you can be in with your home. The second series was all about color. The third series was about each of the planets, both the visible and the non-visible planets. And so this podcast series is going to be all about the Enneagram. So what is it? What are the different types? I'll breeze through during the course of each episode. I'll breeze through a series of correspondences, including, planetary associations, zodiacal associations, runes, chakras, major arcana, tarot cards. But then at the end of each episode, Joanna and I are going to have a banter about how this particular type, how each type, manifests in the house, how they keep house, how they, navigate their stuff and their things and present themselves to themselves, but also to others, if you're in a scenario where you have people over to your home. And so I'm really looking forward to this podcast series. It's going to be 11 episodes long. So this episode today is the opening episode where we're going to sort of hear from you, Joanna, about what is the Enneagram, what are the 9 types, a little bit about the history, who are the major players, that kind of thing. But then subsequent episodes are going to be, a deep dive into each type on its own. So I'm really looking forward to this. The Enneagram is so applicable to life, to understanding oneself. It's also very helpful as others in your life begin to understand themselves through the lens of the Enneagram. Then you've got some real juice to be able to understand each other better and, create more harmony within your life, with the people in your home, with the people in your life, as everyone begins to understand their particular type. I tend to hesitate of, sort of diagnosing other people as a type. Yeah, I'm like, I don't know. Each person needs to decide for themselves, sort of what their type is. I think I know my type, but, the Enneagram is tricky because you read all 9 types and for me, I'm like, well, that one kind of sounds like me. Well, this one kind of sounds like me too, so there's a little bit of that I think a lot of people probably experience also. But as you will see as we go through this series, typically one type will kind of bubble up as sort of your type.
Yes. So it's a part of the journey as well. Finding your type is a part of the journey. I have one of the teachers at my school who says, I'm all the types, and we all have different parts of it. And particularly those that have done a lot of personal growth work, it can be a little difficult to find your type. If you've done a lot of work on ego, done a lot of work on personality, it may be a little bit more difficult for you. So what I recommend to people who might be experiencing a little bit of a challenge is just trying a different one on for a month and maybe do some personal growth work. You're going to gain something from that experience. Now, I was typed under a slightly different school as a different type for the first 10 years or so that I worked with the Enneagram, and then I met this particular school that has a little bit more nuanced approach. And the coach that I was working with said, I'm not sure you're that type. Can we do a typing interview? And we did. And once we got down to the making a decision, I did not want to be the type. That she ended up helping me uncover that I actually am. And that's usually an indicator. If you go, I don't want to be that one, that is probably an indicator.
Yeah,
your ego.
The Enneagram has a funny way of calling you out, like your greatest strength is also somehow your greatest weakness. It's like the weirdest thing. So I'm really looking forward to this journey. So to begin, I guess, like I just want to hear from you, let's talk about the Enneagram, the geometry, the history, just go, Joanna. Tell us, tee it up.
Starting out with what the word Enneagram means. So Ennea is Greek for 9. Gram is Greek for image or icon. So it is literally a circle, has some other shapes inside, which I'll get to, with 9 equidistant points on the outside of the circle. Smack in the middle is a triangle, and under some schools of thought, they call that the holy triangle. Think of it as a law of 3 or a trinity in the middle.
Okay.
So there are some connections to things we might know from other ancient wisdoms. And then there's, I'm going to say it wrong, it's a geometric shape that I often mispronounce that connects some of the other points. And at the very bottom is, some will call that a chasm. So it's this distinct point between 4 and 5 where a lot of growth happens between those points. So all of the Enneagram types in this shape are related somehow. You can have, let's say if you're a 1, you can have a type to the right of you and to the left of you. Those are called wings. And then you can be related to a type across the Enneagram circle from you, some other point across. And my school calls those arrows. And those are both used to consciously access growth points. All types are probably moving around on the Enneagram. I like to really think of it as in motion, and you're tight to the left and you're tight to the right. You are probably unconsciously accessing strengths or not so great strengths of those different positions on the Enneagram. So that's the shape and my personal philosophy about accessing all of these different points. Now, the Enneagram was brought into modern times by an Armenian Sufi mystic, and his name was Gurdjieff, and the early 1900s in Turkey. And not real sure how it moved from Gurdjieff and his students, who were primarily in the Middle East and Europe. There were different schools of thought. And then it reappears in Brazil with Oscar Ichazo, who was teaching in a school called Erica. That's the American pronunciation of that. I'm not even going to try to disrespect and introduce that. And then Oscar Ichazo taught a psychiatrist, also Brazilian, named Claudio Naranjo, who brought the Enneagram to the United States. And he was teaching in California, and some of his students, David Daniels, Helen Palmer, and then my particular school are students of Helen Palmer and David Daniels. So it was brought all the way from an ancient wisdom to the U.S. by specific teachers.
And how ancient is ancient? What are you talking about? Like a few hundred years old, a few thousand years old?
I don't know that anybody knows for sure. Don Riso, who has a school, I think it's Hollenbach, New York, does a trip to Egypt every year where he can point to ancient wisdom. And I don't know if he's using the Kabbalion, which might have some Hermetic schools there, but this is not from tribes in the Middle East. This is ancient, old.
Yeah, well, and the geometry is legit. On the website, livingmandalaconsulting.com, if you go to the podcast page, if you've seen the podcast art, you'll see the shape that you keep alluding to. And it's legit. I mean, it is a sacred geometrical shape that is very intriguing. It pulls you in. You want to know more just by looking at the shape.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And so keep going. Hidden in it. So there's, again, I mentioned the triangle in the middle. So it has this law of 3 that it represents. There is also a law of 7 when you connect the structure of geometry that I can't pronounce. So I'm not even going to try it again. I'll look it up and we have a break so we can do that. It will line up with musical scales. It is this piece of sacred geometry when you are looking at it in its component parts.
Well, and I think that's part of my intrigue and interest is this 7-part correspondence, of the 7 visible planets. There's this, the notes in the scale, like you're pointing towards. There is this sort of all-pervasive typing, for lack of a better word, that sort of naturally manifests. We have the 7 days of the week named after the 7 planets. There's this, I guess heptagram is maybe the word hept is 7. So, okay. Anyway, okay. So very good. So what else? Anything else? There are the 9 types. So,
and I would say the finding out your type is just the start. It's not, I had someone say, well, I don't want you to put me in a box. And I said, well, you're paying me to do a typing interview, but I'm just telling you which box you're in. And that rather than going, I'm type 7, it should be more of, oh, I'm a type 7.
oh,
Yeah. That's the starting point.
it does feel like that.
It does.
It's very called out.
Yeah, it feels combative. I was like, I do that, but only when I'm provoked. Like you come up with some sort of, egoic response to it. And it is just interesting when people sort of I think a lot of people find out their type and say, I'm a 1, so just deal with it. I can't change who I am. Or I'm an 8. Of course I'm going to be assertive and tell you what my opinion is and believe that my truth is the truth. I'm an 8. I can't deal with it.
I was born an apple.
I was born this way. Get over it. And so it is not only when you're open to, not everybody's open to it, but people listening to this are likely open to it. And some of them may go, I'm a 6. And they hear me say, oh, you're a 6. Mm-hmm. And that's where sometimes people can get into type shaming, can go, especially at 8s are the biggest ones that can deal with that, because sometimes they have, most of the time they have the biggest impact on others without realizing it. So there is this level of awareness. So we start out pretty gently, we find out our type, and then we just spend some time in self-observation. And then at some point there is picking folks up by the scruff of the neck and saying, it's just your type. It's who your personality formed as a young person. And this type, some people believe you come in with your type. Some people believe it is only the environment in which you came. There's different schools of thought, and I'm not attached to either one. But the whatever happens in your childhood, it either refines your type or forms your type, depending on which school you're in. And you spend the rest of your life bringing that personality to market that was formed 4, 5, 6, 7 to help you survive whatever it was you were dealing with as a kid. Anybody who was born has something they need to work out. And if you haven't been to therapy, you probably need to. But that's the part of it, is you're trying to be, in my case, a 53-year-old woman with 5-year-old Joanna's tools. And there is hope on the other side. There are things that in the Enneagram's structure, there is this ancient wisdom that says, here's the path forward. Here's a path forward. Here's a way back home. And my view of this, and some of the people that I've been studying with, believe that the Enneagram, if you work these different angles, and there's different steps to make, is a path back home, back to essence, God, Goddess, all that is, whatever universe, whatever you call it. It is a way to shed all of the things that a physical human experience can form in you and help you release that. And gosh, that seems like an exciting journey for me personally, and to help other people experience. It's just been magical for me.
For sure. It's definitely a path of self-realization and understanding. And as I mentioned earlier, I also have observed that for those who kind of are into the Enneagram, if you can get other people close to you to also understand themselves through these lenses, that then you have a path forward of harmony, because you have an understanding of each other.
Oh, I think it's the ultimate, in the world of DEI. I think it is the absolute best tool for inclusion. It gives you a level of compassion and understanding. So if you're a leader, which is where I'm focusing most of my work, and you've typed your team, and this person is, let's say, a 5 who relishes their quiet time and their privacy and does not want to be intruded on, and say you're an 8 leader and you're just jumping into that person's cube, talking and giving orders or whatever you're doing, and not respecting that person has a different cadence than you do, and is not listening to anything you say because they're trying to lock up all of their energy so you don't take it, because that's what they're concerned about.
Wow.
And if you know that, wouldn't you as an awake leader go, okay, I need to manage this differently.
Yeah.
This person I can ideate with, a 7 perhaps, who loves big ideas but cannot implement for so-and-so. Like if you have an operations director that's a 7, you need to find somebody else. Most cases, unless they're super healthy. So that to me is just the inspiration piece for it, is just the impact you can have in an environment.
Yeah.
And particularly in a work environment or in a home environment, rather than home and environment
with your spouse, with your children.
Yes.
That's where I'm kind of, that local mandala that each person has. We have our work mandala, we have our grocery store mandala, we have these different mandalas that each person is the center of their own living mandala. That's kind of the premise of the whole idea. And how we interact and move through the world in these spaces where we spend a lot of time, like work, but also your home. how to be a better roommate to your family.
Yes.
We've got different, tolerance levels with dirty dishes and dirty clothes and, just a level of stuff within a home. We've got minimalist styles. We've got maximalist styles. And how do we best collaborate, as roommates together in this life?
Absolutely. Even the maintaining of the home, the decorating of the home.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And the internal parts of that and the external parts of that can definitely have some preferences for each of the types.
Right.
Look forward to getting into.
So that's going to be the premise of this podcast series. So again, we'll go through the types. There's the 1, which is, I'm just going to say I'm the reformer. 2, the helper. 3, the achiever. 4, the individualist. 5, the investigator. 6, the loyalist. 7, the enthusiast. 8, the challenger. And 9, the peacemaker. Those are the 9 quote-unquote types. And then again, after we go through all of the types, we'll have a closing episode. We'll summarize this experience and kind of have a reflection process about, what just happened with this 11-part series. I cannot wait to go on this journey with you, Joanna, or with listeners. I genuinely hope this is helpful on that path of self-realization and self-actualization. And for me, the little geek that I am, I just love studying the correspondences. And so doing the preparation work for this podcast series to dive deep into the runes and the planets and the tarot and the chakras and just remind myself of lots of different esoteric buckets of information that I'm knee deep in, that there are echoes that come out of this. And I want to give a disclaimer that, these aren't exact equivalencies. So as we go through this process together and we jump into each type, in terms of those correspondences, I'm not saying that, a certain type has to be this zodiac sign or a certain type, is only linked with this planet. It's a lot more nuanced than that. But these are just different lenses that you can go, oh, okay, just to give a little bit more color and depth and more of a faceted understanding of each type through maybe these other lenses that you know more about, like the tarot or the runes or the planets or whatever. So anyway, I give that disclaimer. I'll probably give it every episode. These are not exact equivalencies. They're merely correspondences, which is a different vocabulary word. So anyway, with that, we're going to close this episode and we'll be back in 2 weeks' time with the Enneagram Type 1. You're listening to the Living Mandala podcast.